Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Girlfriend Doctor Show. This is Dr. Anna Cabeca. And one area, as we're recording this, it is January, and I am doing dry January. And I posted on my social media, and there was so many requests for support and help around doing dry January and actually coming off alcohol. So I started to get into the research and looking at, some of the support around eliminating alcohol for a time, forever. What does that look like? And where are the benefits and what are some strategies? And as I was doing that, I came across an article published in Nature Communications on 30th of December, 2024. And what was very interesting, it talked about the flow. It talks about research. They looked at mice, female mice, and their menstrual cycle and the alcohol consumption during their menstrual cycle. So in periods of high estrogen, it showed more alcohol consumption and binge drinking during those periods. So it got me thinking, because perimenopause is such a challenging time with alcohol. There are many clients that I've had have expressed, and especially during the pandemic, that was a really big issue. And with high stress, it leads us into estrogen dominance. And so, with that increase in estrogen, that may also increase that drive, desire for alcohol, or decreased ability to avoid alcohol. And I think that's a really important piece in understanding our physiology. Is there, like, what's the pull? What's the drive? Remember, physiology drives behavior. So, in this case, we're seeing that definitely with alcohol and binge drinking. I always looked at alcohol as causing estrogen dominance, but now we see that it's like a chicken or the egg phenomena. Which came first, the estrogen dominance and the alcohol consumption, or the alcohol consumption and the estrogen dominance? It's probably a little bit of both here. But today, I am a big fan of our podcast guest who comes all the way from Ireland. Her name is Olivia Farrelly. Did I say that right?
Yeah, it's perfect. Yeah.
Okay. And I found her podcast, No More Booze, and I found her social media channel and some interviews and posts she'd made. And I was like, I got to bring you on to help me and to support my community around avoiding alcohol or becoming dry. And Olivia, welcome. And also, just to share that Olivia is not only in Dublin, Ireland, but she's has two children, and she has the #1 podcast in the Irish self-improvement charts called No More Booze. And also, she has a BSc in social psychology and a master's in health psychology, as well as a diploma in alcohol studies. So she's used her education and personal experience to really dive deep in such a open, authentic way about no more booze, about alcohol and drinking. So
Yeah.
welcome, Olivia.
Oh, thank you, Anna. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. I really am.
Well, tell us a little bit about your journey and your story.
Yeah, so I had a fairly typical road to drinking. So I started drinking like a huge amount of my friends in the 1990s. I was born in 1980. I'm 44 now. So I started drinking I had a couple of drinks when I was 14, and then kind of intermittently started drinking when I was 15, 16, that kind of thing. So that kind of coincided with a time where alcohol really became more available to young people and to women as well. So there was a different type of alcohol that was being provided than, let's say, the spirits. So there was the introduction, certainly here in Ireland, of alco pops. So they're highly sweetened, highly coloured. I think kind of spritzers, that kind of thing. So started off kind of drinking them. I'm sure it's the same in the States as it is here. When we go to university, it's a bit of a party. There was a big drinking culture there. I immersed myself fully in it. Certainly in first year, I enjoyed my friendships, probably enjoyed drinking a little too much. I loved out. So I loved being social. I loved connecting with people. And I suppose now, as I reflect back, that's what, alcohol helped me to do. Like I felt that it was kind of an elixir. It made me more confident. It made me feel more brave. It made me, I suppose, have more fun, in and of that moment. And, I especially loved the day after, when all of the friends would come around and we talk about our adventures and our escapades and all that kind of stuff. So, um, if you look at how my attitudes and beliefs towards alcohol were formed, then it was very pro alcohol. So the cost of drinking was very low. I was still quite young, and I was able to get up for work every morning. It didn't feel like it impacted me that much. So the benefits were quite high, and the costs were very low. So that kind of continued. I traveled the world. I spent a summer in the States, in New Jersey, working. I traveled around Australia. I lived in the UK for a while. So it kind of, there were periods of, I was very ensconced in drinking culture. And then there were periods when I wasn't really, if I had to pull it out and out of the bag and study lots. So met my husband then in my late 20s. Naturally, things kind of settled down with him. We began kind of homemaking and nesting, and we had a couple of kids. And, if there was times in my life when I needed to be really on, so I like if I had set a lot of fitness goals, or I was trying to achieve something, I nearly instinctively knew to give up alcohol, because there was nearly like an instinctive gut feeling that alcohol wasn't serving me. Now, it was below huge amount of layers. Do you remember I said back that I was highly conditioned towards thinking that alcohol was, great fun and we needed it for all aspects of our lives? So I suppose when I had two children, and when they were quite young, we were quite sleep deprived. Now, I'm a person who places huge amount of importance on my sleep. Still do. Like, you will find me in the bed at 8 or 9 p.m., right? I need a lot of sleep. So when the kids came along, it was a case, I wasn't returning to the level of alcohol intake that I had done maybe in my 20s, but even a couple of glasses of wine on a Friday night was horrendous. So like I would wake up with palpitations, my mood would be incredibly low, and my anxiety, is what it's called now, was, I mean, through the roof. So I did my first alcohol free. So I did a dry January actually in 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017, I did a dry December. So fully through that holiday season, and thought I was cured, that I could moderate my alcohol intake, started drinking again then. And then I suppose the break came after a pretty heavy holiday in Spain when we were at a wedding. Again, the kids were very young. They were only 3 and 1. We went off, let loose. It was a family wedding. All was good, or so I thought, until I woke up, and what was probably the worst hangover of my life was the amount of anxiety, heart palpitations, feeling of dread, doom, all of these incredibly overwhelming feelings. And I had done those few alcohol-free stints before that, but I definitely made up my mind right at that moment that enough was enough, and I was done. So I was done, and that was 2007. That was 2018. So I'll be 7 years alcohol-free in July, and the benefits have been just astronomically good from every aspect of my life.
And so you went completely cold turkey, never picked it up again. Now, how did you
Yeah.
navigate the temptations, the urges, you know,
Yeah, absolutely. So I found, so physically, I don't think I was dependent on alcohol. So I suppose psychologically, I associated it with connection and sociability and all those kind of things. So the physical thing was fine. So I didn't have many cravings or urges, but psychologically, when I went out with my friends, I had to that was that was tougher than I had expected. So there's a lot of resistance when you give up alcohol. I don't know if it's the same with you. I probably do know that it's the same with you because I've worked with people from the States. But let's say we give up cigarettes. And I've talked with loads of people who've given up cigarettes, and everybody is for you. They are like, oh, they're so supportive. They cheerlead you the whole way there. But alcohol is a different thing. It's because of what people associate with what people who don't drink are. They think that they are boring. Even the word sober means, somber, and it doesn't have great connotations. So it's tough to navigate. I suppose when you have friendships that expect you, to have a couple of cocktails or to enjoy a drink, and you turn up and you say, "Oh, sorry, I'm now a different person." They think you're a different person, whereas, you just have made a decision to become, put your own needs first. And that's what a lot of it is. And in the groups that I run, I teach a lot about personal sovereignty. So at what stage do we take back, do we have our own responsibility, our own acceptance, our own choice? And that's a huge part of the path too. But I'm the queen of self-help. So I read a lot, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and they were hugely beneficial. And back this nearly 7 years ago, there wasn't that much stuff on, sober Instagram or quit lit. But since that, it has really taken on a life of its own. And I don't know about you, but I see it absolutely everywhere. It's become this phenomenal trend. And even dry January now, here in Ireland, there was a survey out last year to say that 1 in 2 adults in Ireland were going to do dry January. And in 2023 in the UK, 8 million people did dry January. So, people are seeing a huge amount of benefits from dry January, and they're going with it then for a lot longer as well. So yeah, it's tricky to navigate, but I think if you have a little bit of support, if you have a community that you can dip in and out of, if you have access to sober books, Quitlet, and podcasts, I think that's a really good place to start.
Yeah. And, the conflict has been, oh, well, a glass of red wine with dinner, that's resveratrol. That will, that's healthy. And now we have research saying, okay, any amount of alcohol, really is associated with increased risk of breast cancer, increased risk of dementia, increased risk of diabetes. And there's no benefit, cardiovascular benefit. Resveratrol in and of itself is a good antioxidant. And I always argued, I said, is it the glass of red wine, or is it the people you're sitting around the table with, having fun with, drinking a glass of red wine that is actually the health benefit, the oxytocin piece of that, right? And so that's how alcohol really was driven into the public to say, okay, you can have a glass of red wine a day. And of course, like, what does a glass look like? How big is your glass? And from there on, that I made it really difficult for a lot of women. I think, especially understanding now the issues with estrogen, that there's actually a spike in drinking and binge drinking when we have estrogen, so higher estrogen, and that's typically pre-ovulation. So we get a spike of estrogen before we ovulate. So they almost, like, I was looking at the research again today and thinking, oh, isn't that interesting? So you get this spike of estrogen, you're drinking, inhibitions are down, you're ovulating like the next day. So you may be having, looser inhibitions to sex, and that's increasing fertility, let's say, increasing in pregnancy, or that desire at that time. I thought that was interesting. And then the second phase in our mid to late luteal phase is when estrogen increases again. And in perimenopause, we tend to become more estrogen dominant because progesterone's the predominant hormone in the luteal phase, the second phase, right before we start bleeding. And the ester as we age, we start to lose those protective progesterone levels, especially when we're under stress. And hormone disruptors, et cetera, add to this what we call estrogen dominance or progesterone insufficiency. Because I definitely, in my own life, experience those urges to drink more during those, during that perimenopausal time frame, especially when I was post-divorce, and I'd have a week with the kids and a week with no one, essentially home alone. That is not a good place to drink. And I had to really think, okay, what am I doing? It's obviously not for my health, and go work towards stopping alcohol, especially if I'm, alone. Never to drink alone became a rule. And yet there's this gray area drinking that I've carried through today. Like, okay, a glass of tequila, a glass of wine once in a while is perfectly fine. And I've really, over the last few years, have very little alcohol, but not none. So
Okay.
wondered about this area. It's gray area drinking. The more I read the research on alcohol, the more it convinces me to completely stay away. But yet there's that. But a glass of tequila once in a long while is not a bad thing. A glass of red wine, a good glass of red wine with friends, that's not a bad thing. And so I'm curious on your take on this.
Yeah, so there's been a huge amount of research, certainly in the last kind of 5 years. And there's a lot of organizations coming out saying that no amount of alcohol is safe. I know
Right.
the World Health Organization are doing a huge push at the minute to say just that. And just last week in the States, the Surgeon General came out and said that warning labels need to be placed on alcohol because it is the third leading preventable cause of cancers in the US. So there's all of this research coming out, certainly in the last couple of years, that it's making it more and more hard to find the benefits of drinking in terms of like health. And, so there's a huge amount of health harms associated with it. And for me, I was probably 2 years into my uh, alcohol-free life that I started to look at the health stuff. But certainly in 2020, a big study came out as well. So looking at that and kind of focusing on the health benefits of alcohol-free living and everything that that brings has been an incredible benefit. And a huge amount of people are now saying, I'm doing it for the health of it. I don't have, that all or nothing kind of
Right.
expression of drinking. Certainly for me, I was a gray area drinker. So I gave up alcohol because I couldn't cope with the hangovers anymore. Okay. So physically, I was very, very ill. The anxiety was very bad. My moods were very low. So it was all of that that really impacted my, I suppose my mental state, how I conducted my life. And I was a little bit into not drinking when I heard the term gray area drinker. And I thought, oh my God, that is absolutely the way I drank. So I suppose if we look at alcohol use on a bit of a spectrum, and on one spectrum we have that, occasional drinker. They might drink a couple of drinks a year, but alcohol has no pull. They can take it or leave it. And then at the other end of the spectrum, we have that person who is severely dependent on alcohol. And then they say somewhere in the middle that's where gray area drinkers uh, reside. So I am one of those. So I could easily have no alcohol, but as soon as I had one, that kind of I got a taste for it, let's say. So I always said it was like a train had left the station and I had no control over it. So it was never just one, it was always five or six. I really enjoyed that feeling of that kind of surge. And I know it's a surge of dopamine. So I really enjoyed that. And I looked for it and I looked for it for more and more and more. And lots of people that I work with describe themselves as that all or nothing drinker. So your drinking doesn't look problematic to others. So people aren't saying, oh, I think Olivia has a problem with the drink. It all looks kind of perfectly normal. And you silently worry that it is a problem. So there's this kind of little voice within you saying things like, I overdid it last night. I didn't really intend to drink that much. Another sign of gray area drinking, you always intend to drink less than you actually end up doing. As well, you can stop for periods of time, but you always come back to it. So something always lures you back in. But you can stop, but you can't stay stopped. And you often set rules around it. So if you go out for a night and you say, right, I'm going to have 4 drinks and that's it, and then I'm going to get a taxi home. But oftentimes those 4 drinks turn into 5, 6, or 7, and that's the way it was for me. And realizing that I was that gray area drinker, and having a name to put to it, it felt a lot easier because I didn't know what I was. All I knew is I just had to give up alcohol because, again, like I said earlier, the costs were way higher than the benefits at that stage. So yeah, I work with a lot of, it's the majority of it is women now, and it's women kind of the same age as me who came of age in the mid 90s and who glorified alcohol, who depended on it to socialize. And then I suppose when they got into their 30s and 40s, they started to using it to relieve stress or to cope with things or to transition from their day job into, minding children and the 40,000 other jobs that we have to do as women, and certainly I think you mentioned the pandemic earlier, like a huge amount of people noticed that their drinking escalated during the pandemic, certainly at home drinking, obviously, because we couldn't go anywhere. And that's a kind of, that was a huge issue for women, especially. They started drinking a lot more at home and a lot more wine, So, yeah, giving up alcohol. So I'm nearly 7 years, and there's not a day that goes by where I'm not thankful for all the benefits that it has brought in my life. The clarity, the lack of guilt, the lack of shame. I'm from 6 o'clock in the morning, I am ready to go. There is nothing. There's nothing stopping me. Kind of become little bit insufferable as well, Anna.
That's awesome. That's the privilege of our 40s for sure.
Oh, it's
And
wonderful.
and I think you're looking at that and you're seeing the health benefits, you're seeing the physical benefits, the familial benefits. And in that transition time, as you work with clients, and I work with clients all the time, and I'm trying to get them healthy, but they're like, well, why socialize? Well, my husband and I have a drink every night. That's our thing. I said, well, can you switch it to a non-alcoholic cocktail? So you're still having a drink, but it's not alcohol. Because if we're working on hormones or they had a history of cancer, it's like it's an absolute no. So how do what strategies do you like, top 3 strategies that you implement with your clients that really begins to empower them to be able to choose to say no versus being driven to want the
Yes.
alcohol?
Absolutely. So just like you said there, so if they have these rituals that they engage with all the time, so it's keep the rituals. And like you said, just change the ingredient. So make sure you have that beautiful glass, but you fill it with something else. There's never been a better time to be alcohol free. Certainly here in Ireland, the amount of choice that has come on the market in the last 2 to 3 years, you can get any type of non-alcoholic drink. Like when I gave up, there was very limited amounts. You might get a dusty bottle of beer, 0.0 beer, from a shelf in a pub, and you might literally get abused by a barman because he didn't think you should be in there drinking a non-alcoholic drink. But there's a huge amount of choice. Something beautiful like a sparkling tea or a kombucha, which will serve the purpose of being good for your gut health as well. So definitely keep the ritual, just change the ingredient. Another thing that I would say, when we take alcohol out, there's a lot more time. Okay, so let's say you have your couple of glasses of wine on a Friday and Saturday evening, you will automatically gain all of that time on the Friday evening, a bit of time that's maybe spent recovering on the Saturday, and then the Saturday evening as well. So all of that time needs to be spent doing something else. So we take alcohol out, but we have to put in new things. And what happens, I think, with certainly a lot of the people that I work with, because they have started drinking at such a young age, right? well, this happened with me anyway, and I've seen it with other people, they stagnate. So they feel like they go back to being that age, maybe 16, 17, 18, 19, whatever age it was. So what I encourage and what lots of people encourage as well is that we go back to that stage. We kind of embody who we were, find out the things that we really like doing, and then revert back to that. So that could be like volleyball, crochet, it could be meditating, it could be joining groups, but it's to fill that time with something wholesome and, heartwarming and all of those things that bring you joy. And then the third thing I would say, try and connect with other people. So, I had previously alluded to the fact that a lot of women just started drinking a lot more and a lot more at home during the pandemic. So when we're sitting at home and drinking our bottle of wine, and then automatically we're doing this behind closed doors. So it's not something that we shout or we acknowledge on a public basis. So that kind of brings about a lot of shame with people. So if they can connect with other people whose drinking is maybe escalating like theirs is, or that kind of it gets rid of a lot of the shame. So the connection piece, and you talked about oxytocin there, and I know certainly I do a lot of work on Zoom and I do a lot of group work, and when I'm saying to women, when they're giving their stories and they're being really vulnerable and really brave as well, there's people nodding so the experience is universal. So when you express something and everybody else agrees with you, then you don't feel so alone. And that kind of peer support and the accountability is just so wonderful because everybody has a
Mhm.
shared experience. So they're experiencing the same thing in real time. So if you can access some kind of support, an online community or like even something like a hiking group, and I certainly here in Ireland, there is so many things popping up. We have so many social communities. We have so many alcohol-free communities. You can go up a mountain on a Saturday night and then go play board games with another group of alcohol-free people on in the evening. So it's just about finding out who they are and accessing them in your area.
Or creating your own, right?
Apps are creating your own.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I love that because, we look at the health benefits of hiking a mountain, et cetera.
Yeah.
And also for many people that understanding that glass of alcohol also slows down your metabolism for up to 72 hours. So for
Yeah.
weight, it's critical for sleep. Alcohol does not help you get a good night's sleep. So now that we have more of this research, the arguments we were using for alcohol are taken away. And I like that you say, creating that community, that those shared new experiences and filling the void so you're not filling the void in an unhealthy way, but rather in a healthy way.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. And what I've seen as well with women, I said it there a few minutes ago, they start to then see themselves with the same amount of potential as they did before they started drinking. So it ends up being this incredibly um, evolving journey where they start reaching their potential because they have so much more clarity, they have so much more consistency, they have so much more motivation. They're completely inspired on a day-to-day basis. So it's this radical change within them because they're used to operating at maybe 50%,
Right,
So if you
right.
wake up with a hangover, you're a little bit groggy, you're craving high fat, high sugar, foods. On average we eat about 300 more calories with a hangover than without one. So your sleep is disrupted, so you're not at 100%. Whereas when you remove alcohol, I know it takes a couple of weeks to really reset and reach more balance, but when you hit the ground running, you are absolutely a completely different person. And it's not just me who's experienced this. I have, my own podcast, No More Booze. I've launched that last year, and I've had 53 guests so far in that year. And every single person, as well as the hundreds of people that I've worked with as well, they say the same thing. You will never meet a person who has given up alcohol who's regretted it.
Hmm.
Everybody,
Hmm.
everybody feels these benefits without fail, and nobody's lying, it's actually universal, that all the benefits that come along with removing alcohol.
It makes it easier to stay with that, right? To continue to avoid temptation, et cetera. And, if it is tempting, what's been interesting too in this study and trying to, in my own journey, looking at, okay, sometimes I'm completely off alcohol for months and then I'll have, a glass of wine here, a glass of tequila there, but it's that inner voice that says, you really don't need this. It's
Yeah,
really not serving you. And I like the concept, the inspirational piece that, okay, I'm going to go back to where I was 20, 30, 40 years ago and recreate that energy. And also the fact that when you do drink, you are sluggish more the next day, not just your metabolism physically, but actively tend to be more sluggish. And versus like, okay, if you schedule a strategy that I've used with clients too is schedule an early morning walk, schedule an, meet up with a friend, have an accountability partner so that that, okay, I've got to get up at 6 or 7 a.m. and go for a walk. I better not have that drink, you know.
yeah.
And so, whatever strategies that can help too. And nutritionally too, with healthy nutrition, reestablishing, replenishing lost vitamins and minerals from alcohol, I think is a big piece as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And just making sure that, you eat very regularly and that you consume kind of healthy things as well. And you'd be more inclined to eat healthily because you have your body doesn't feel that it needs to replenish. You don't crave high fat, high sugar things when you're not hungover, so that, certainly when I had a drink, like, well, first of all, I would be sick for maybe 10 hours, so I couldn't stomach anything. And then afterwards, I would literally eat the leg of the table. So it would be like pizza, and I'd eat far more than I intended to as well, just to make myself feel better. And again, that was an urge within me too. But yeah, like what you said there about scheduling early classes, and that works with a lot of people that I work with. And certainly I'm running a couple of dry January programs at the minute. So what I encourage people to do, so like we're habitual beings, right? We like habit. Okay, so people say things to me like, but Friday night, how can my Friday night be any good? And I say things like, do a class, go to the cinema. I've one woman I worked with a year ago in dry January, right? She's a year off it now. And she went to the cinema every Friday night for 6 weeks to distract herself from that Friday night ritual that she had developed over how many years, and especially red wine. And that's certainly seems to be a lot of people that I work with like the red wine. And it felt like the show that she associated with that with the shoulder drop, and that kind of relaxation and that uh, entry into the weekend and weekend mode, whereas she just replaced that with going to the movies, I suppose, for 6 weeks. And then she had broken that habit, and she was able then to introduce her kombucha or her 0 0 wine, or they do nice fizzy like prosecco alternatives over here as well. So she was doing that kind of thing. So there's a lot of things that we can do. Plus, I think as well, a lot of people's instinct is that alcohol isn't serving them anymore. So,
Right.
our instinct is it's not feeling good within my body, within my soul, right? And that,
Hmm.
but then we look around I suppose our culture and our society and where we live, but everything says that alcohol is good, alcohol is fine. We use alcohol to celebrate everything, every occasion. You buy a house, you get engaged, absolutely everything.
New
Births,
Year's Eve, right?
New Year's Eve, Christmas, absolutely everything. So when we turn up and we're different. It's hard to navigate something when you're on your own. When I gave up alcohol, not one of my friends were alcohol free. I now have 7 girlfriends who are alcohol free. Not from maybe for me, I don't know, but it's the culture is changing. We're
Hmm.
all changing based on a lot of research. There just seems to be a cultural shift. People want more out of their lives. Nobody wants to spend, extra time in bed in their free time on a Saturday and Sunday morning recovering from the excesses of the night before. So it's
Yeah.
all about just, getting as much out of life as you really, really can, and
Yeah.
alcohol free will do that for you.
Yeah, and I definitely know more people now that are alcohol free in the entrepreneurial space. We go out to um, conferences or masterminds, and it's like there's a lot of us drinking just sparkling soda and sparkling water or something. But having those, now I always questioned about the alcohol free alternative. Does that increase cravings? Is that a good substitute to have? And
Yeah, I think it depends on the individual. So it depends on what people, what their preferences are. I suppose the space in which I work is that middle lane, kind of middle lane, all or nothing drinkers, that gray area drinkers. So they
Mhm.
have shown themselves to kind of, they can take it or leave it at times. So it's definitely an individual choice. So if you feel like, having a 0-0 beer might, mimic, or it might make you want a real beer, I would definitely say stay away from that. But again, it's you need to make that decision for yourself. I know I actually never drank beer as a when I drank. I would like wine, or I might like gin or vodka or something like that. But now actually only very recently I've discovered 0-0 beers and I really like them. Now I'll have one, maybe two, but I then, will have maybe a nice mocktail, but it's not, I don't, I don't have more than two or three, and then I'll just switch to water.
Yeah, and no cravings, right? That's good.
No, yeah,
That's so
absolutely.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I suppose incrementally, then I've developed, I've become more confident. I have become more brave. So alcohol, does a lot of things for us. So let's say we go to something that we're nervous, a social event, and we're nervous and we've little butterflies in our tummies, and you know we take alcohol to make us feel better. Whereas when we remove that, we have to step into our own bravery. We have to become confident and self-assured and more authentic and
Or
more
more
ourselves.
authentic. I love
Yeah.
that. Mhm.
Yeah, it has the amount of, I often say, so I drank for 23 years, and I say I've evolved more in the last 6 years than I had in the 23 previous, just personal development and emotional regulation, how I pause and before I react to something, I respond a lot better now. I'm
Mm.
more patient, I'm more calm, I'm a better mother, I'm 100% a better person from removing alcohol.
That's powerful. And I definitely see that in clients. Now, the question is when someone has a slip back, so you're coaching someone and they're like, oh, well, we had a dinner party and I went for that glass or two of wine. Now, like, what do I do? I have to
Yeah.
start the time from zero again. Darn it.
Yeah, darn it. But listen, I slipped and slided my way into this whole thing, and it's a very typical thing that happens. So what we do is we treat that as feedback. It's absolutely not a failure. So what
Yeah.
did you learn from it? What were the things that made you want to do it? How did you react? I work with people all the time who, especially over Christmas, might have had a glass or two of wine, and they will tell a cautionary tale that it was never like it was before. So a couple of people who'd had a good bit of alcohol-free time under their bed, under their belt, and they went back and they said the anxiety was worse. I felt groggy the next day. I was used to all this clarity. I was used to getting up and going first thing, maybe on a Saturday morning, and then I just didn't appreciate that kind of sluggishness. And that's how you learn that there's
Hmm.
no place in your life for it again. So like I did my first alcohol, well, I did a few alcohol-free stints, but in 2017, I kept learning the same lesson. I kept expecting alcohol to be different. So I'd go back to it, but it was always the same. So it always made me feel the same. It never changed. I had to. So I had
Mhm.
to change all of these things about myself. So how I reacted to situations, how I processed my emotions, how I dealt with stress, how I dealt with, going from work mode into mom mode and, all of these different things. So it's this powerful catalyst for so much evolution and change. It is, yeah, I often say it's the greatest thing I've ever done,
Well,
and it is.
right, it's freedom, right? And I like
Yes.
that. Say, okay, being authentically relying on your own personality, your own skill set, your own energy level, your own talents, etc. So, okay, so what I've heard you say as far as strategy is definitely build community,
Yeah.
community support groups, and you have amazing community groups that you do virtually as well. So we'll give that information in the show notes. Create substitutions. Substitute that glass of wine for something else or non-alcoholic something else that you're comfortable with and that you can enjoy and that may have health benefits like a kombucha, for instance. And number three, nourish yourself well. Make sure you're nourished so you're not in a craving state, which decreases our willpower and can affect our resolve. So nourish yourself well with good nutrition and regular eating. Prioritize sleep for sure, and alcohol disrupts our sleep 100%. There's no exceptions there.
No.
So prioritize sleep and create activities to substitute the time that would have otherwise been spent with alcohol or alcohol related activities, but to create a priority substitute, like the example you gave of going to the cinema every Friday night for 6 weeks till she was like, okay, let's move on with this. And I love those strategies.
And give it a bit of time too.
Yeah.
So we give alcohol chance after chance after chance, right? And if you can give it there's a lot of research to say that 100 days is a lovely amount of time for you to untangle from a lot of the conditioning, for you to get a bit of clarity, for you to kind of stand back and observe what it did to you, and what it was serving a need for. So obviously, we drink because it serves a purpose. So it would have served a purpose for me when I was younger in terms of connection, in terms of bravery, I had a social anxiety. It made that feel better. I'm a highly sensitive person, and so it knocked off that high sensitivity in my brain, and I was able to kind of be more myself. Well, what I thought was more myself. So I had to look at all of that, the reasons why I drank, the attitudes of everybody around me, and then looking at now, what are the benefits of it? There's so much research out there, and there's so many phenomenal books from experts all over the world. So it's a very nice time to be alcohol free.
A lot of support, a lot of
A lot
support,
of
and a lot of
support.
strategies to help
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I thank you so much for this. Talking about alcohol too, when I was in 2 years ago, I went to a retreat in Mexico, and the mama that was there, she was this like beautiful, lovely woman in her 60s, Mexican heritage, and she just had this like beautiful maternal way about her. Her skin glowed. She was so energetic and and she says, alcohol, they call it spirits because alcohol opens the door to spirits and then unhealthy spirits. So she'd been alcohol free for at that point 20 years, but she's very much against the culture, the tequila culture and everything else. So she started very early on. But she said, I recognize that, like I don't want any other spirits than my own. But that concept that there's alcohol's been called spirits for a reason. It opens a door to decrease inhibitions, to allow behaviors that you wouldn't necessarily allow, and then experiences that don't serve you. And so some of these unhealthy spirits, I had never put I always knew that alcohol were called spirits, but I never really understood any of the background around that. So I thought that was interesting, understanding some of the mythical realities around alcohol too.
Yeah, and even myself. So it was a very common occurrence for me to black out. I could have blacked out sometimes after 3 drinks. When I look back, I didn't have a great tolerance for alcohol, but sometimes I did, depending on, my cycle as well. So oftentimes it was like kind of Russian roulette. So oftentimes I would have said things I didn't mean. I would have behaved in ways that weren't aligned with all the values that I hold close, right? But in the 6.5 years that I haven't had a drink, I have never said anything I didn't mean. I have never been rude to anybody. I have never talked out of turn. I have never had such self-loathing that I had. So it wasn't, I was behaving in a way that wasn't me. It completely
Yeah. Yeah.
misrepresented me. So the alcohol, I don't behave like that anymore. So it wasn't me. And I think we have a culture of blaming the person and not the substance. But it's not, because like I haven't behaved like that since. So obviously it was the alcohol, it wasn't me, and I think that's a if we really want to go on a journey and go on a path, I definitely think that a lot of people should at least give it a try. We obviously form and create our own path in the world, right? I firmly believe that. And what a beautiful time that we're in, that we have access to so many things like YouTube, all these beautiful thought leaders, who are saying we are the creators of our experience, of our lives. So why not choose a little bit more wisely, and
Mhm.
give yourself at least a bit of time away from it, and then you can make up your mind. We're all intelligent, sovereign, autonomous beings, so we can make these decisions for ourselves. So if it's for you, do it. I hope I've put it forward an argument to say it's absolutely exceptional, but
Yeah.
everyone has their own free will, so you can do whatever you want, but it is pretty
Yeah, no, but
spectacular.
I like the push for the 100 days. So,
Yeah.
I want to commit to those 100 days too, Olivia, and just say, okay, let me push it for 100 days,
Yeah.
and just see, right? Like to see, okay, we're in this commitment to health and wellness and being authentic, right?
Yeah.
Showing up as your authentic self, being at home in your body,
Yeah.
and functioning your best with kindness and with caring and consideration and compassion and empathy and love for humanity. That to show up in that way more fully is definitely part of my goal. And I've told my audience I'm on this breast explant journey too. So, like, along with everything else, you further inspired for dry January was getting the healthiest possible prior to surgery. And I think that's a really important piece because alcohol, is metabolized in the liver. Anesthesia is metabolized in our liver. Hormones are metabolized in our liver. And definitely as we get older, if alcohol never served us, it never serves us even less in menopause and beyond.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I appreciate your help and this conversation. How can people work with you and get a hold of you, Olivia?
Yeah, so I have an Instagram account and it's at Grey Area Drinker. I have a podcast called No More Booze, the podcast that won an award last week here in Ireland. Um,
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. So listen, it's definitely a thing here in Ireland, and the podcast success reflects that. And I have a website as well, so it's www.greyareadrinker.ie.
Thank you. Thank you for your time today and for being here on the Girlfriend Doctor Show. I've enjoyed our conversation. I love the Irish. I'm going to come visit you
Oh,
and
for sure. Yeah.
at some point. All right.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. I really enjoyed this conversation with my guest, and I definitely want to help support you more if you're going alcohol free for however many times. But for me, it's going to be 100 days just committing for dry January, dry February, dry March, and part of dry April. And then maybe we'll see from there. But I think this just first is committing and understanding one step at a time, having healthy substitutions available. One of my favorites is to make mighty maca with sparkling water and a squirt of lemon. And that's my Mighty Maca cocktail. Really, really easy. And the other is drinking it hot, just hot Mighty Maca with hot, mighty maca with hot water. So as a hot tea is perfectly great. I like to find some occasional kombucha that's low sugar. You have to watch with kombucha because you want to be low glycemic kombucha. And there are some mushroom elixirs that serve as cocktail you can put with sparkling water, and that can make a nice adaptogenic cocktail drink too. And a lot of good options that are out there and available now. The biggest thing is prioritizing you, realizing it is time to, and you are worth letting go of things that no longer serve you. You are not held to anything external to you, but to prioritize your health and well-being, to prioritize your family and your capacity in all ways is number one priority for you. And that's part of the self-love and self-acceptance. I'm on this journey with you. So please let me know what questions you have, what concerns you have, what benefits you're seeing, and challenges. So I'm here for you too. And I'm digging in my health journey even more this year than ever. So wishing you a joyful experience through all of this. And God bless you. Thank you for watching the Girlfriend Doctor Show. Please like, share, subscribe to this channel. It really helps to expand the reach of the message, and I appreciate you for doing so. Till next time, it's Dr. Anna Cabeca.
Thanks for watching another episode of the Girlfriend Doctor podcast. Check out all the links below for more.